What's going on, ladies and gents, boys and girls, guardians of all ages? Joker back again once again, and today, people, today we're talking about what is basically the end of Season 17 as the story has drawn to a close. Now, I do understand that technically speaking, we still have the Solstice event and the updates that come along with that, but that'll get its own video. There's also the GM Nightfalls that just became available, but gas, shock, horror, lightning crackle, lightning crackle, lightning crackle, they haven't changed. So, for all intents and purposes, the end of the story does mean the end of all the core content that will become available, at least for the sake of this video. So let's talk about the activities and the grinds. Now, I've talked about this a lot already. Some would argue I've talked about it to death. Some would say, Joker, stop beating that dead horse. And you know what? They're probably right. But for the sake of argument and a cohesive video, and because every video is someone's first, I'll reiterate. But I will also try to be quick about it. Season of the Haunted brought us 2 main activities, and no, the dungeon does not count as it is sold separately. Counting the dungeon seems kinda counterintuitive, when realistically it would be like counting all the Eververse armor and saying,
oh hey, look, our season has so much new cool loot.
That being said, at some point I will do a video on the dungeon, it's on the list. As for core activities, we have 2 activities. Containment, which is your bog standard horde mode. Though, I've gotta say, Containment has to stand out is quite possibly one of, if not the most boring iteration of a horde mode not horde mode that we've had in quite a while. There's no fail state, and rewards don't seem dependent on how well you perform during the 3 waves. Not that it matters what rewards you get because you're not really playing this for the loot, but for the currency, opulent umbral energy that can be used at the Crown of Sorrow to focus engrams, which is the most direct way to get the loot that you're looking for, and even here, you're not looking for specific roles or specific weapons. All you're doing is turning in engrams and hoping that you get a red box weapon. Destiny is carried by its loot, and how you acquire it. The most daunting of chores can be elevated by the loot, because, let's be real for a moment, even the best, most perfectly crafted raid or dungeon or strike becomes a chore with repetition. I think that's something that should be fairly common sense. The Vault of Glass is fun. The Vault of Glass 140 times, with no Vex Mythoclast to show for it, not so much fun. So the staying power of any activity is essentially its loot. However, Destiny 2 has unfortunately reached the point where loot doesn't really matter in a looter shooter. Destiny also lacks the social and world building aspects of virtually every other MMO to keep players engaged when the activities or the loot can't. Yeah, I still think calling Destiny, which is a little more than a glorified looter shooter, an MMO, and comparing it to World of Warcraft is still quite possibly one of, if not the dumbest things to ever come out of Bungie management, but I digress. Now I want to clarify something. Most of my time in Destiny is generally spent in PvP. I don't need a lot of fancy loot. Some of my favorite weapons are Ace of Spades, Hawkmoon, Austringer, Eye of Selûne, primaries that are relatively easy to get. Technically speaking, I don't need new shiny shit all the time. I come from Halo. Back in my day, we had 2 sticks and a rock, and we had to share the rock. The last time I felt a sense of pride and accomplishment in Destiny was getting Not Forgotten. And jeez, that was years ago now, back before it was nerfed into the ground. Oh hey, Not Forgotten is kinda sorta broken right now in PvP. It's doing crazy things that it shouldn't be doing. Do with that information as you please. I think the biggest issue Destiny faces is a lack of truly aspirational content. And the reason for that is simple. 1, Bungie can't let the have-nots not get theirs. And 2, Destiny's becoming more and more like a mobile game. I wonder why. It's one of life's biggest mysteries. The world may never know. Currently, some of the best loot in the game doesn't require any grinding or doing anything challenging. It's not hard to get. It requires you to wait. All you have to do is wait for your weekly lockout to end so you can get your Figment of Darkness, so you can level up your Crown of Sorrow, so you can turn in your Opulent Umbral Energy for your once a week guaranteed red border weapon. You can also get red border weapons for the first time you open up an opulent chest or the first time you beat a containment activity. So while on paper it might take 5 weeks and you're done, it really won't. Now I know, worst case scenario, that sounds like a long time theoretically speaking. It would take a month, several months, to unlock every weapon. But not every weapon's worth having. Also, you don't have to play the game more than a bare minimum, and you get some of the best loot in the game. There's nothing to it. You just show up, and everything's handed to you. What's aspirational about that? Crafting is kind of a problem. While I understand wanting bad luck protection, crafting has changed the way that we engage in loot grinds. God rolls don't matter if they're not crafted.
But Joker,
I hear you cry out in your shrill, tremulous voice.
Crafted weapons aren't that much better. It's just a slight stat bump.
Okay, then why exactly did we have to neuter Trials of Osiris so bad players could go to the lighthouse to get adept weapons, Why did Bungie make it this whole moral thing about the haves and the have-nots? I mean, realistically, Trials weapons are less useful than craftable weapons, they're randomly rolled, and they only come with a slight stat bump. You're going to tell me, in lieu of everything that happened to Trials of Osiris, and all the bitching and complaining about RNG weapons, weapons that you can customize, mix and match, weapons that if, say, a perk gets nerfed, you can swap out, so you're not stuck with a useless weapon. Oh yeah, and the stat bump are not definitely better, like, come on. There's Defending Destiny, and then there's Abject Denial of Reality. So yeah, crafted weapons are kind of sort of the end-all be-all of the weapon grind, which leaves players chipping away at various grinds that, in the long term, are unsatisfying. I mean, how demoralizing must it be to get a 5 out of 5 weapon, and no, it's still not the best, and also know that there's no way you can take this really cool lucky roll you got and turn it into the best of the best. That just sucks. And I think this weapon grind is leading to a lot of burnout, as we've seen more and more throughout Destiny this season. The other activity is 3 story missions. Yes, technically there's 8, but you can't replay 2, apparently, and 6 of them are just the 3 same story missions with different dialogue. These missions aren't horrible, but they also don't have a lot of replay value to them. They may have been a great secondary way to get loot, more so with the farming of umbral energy you have to do in the containment public event, allowing you to stockpile what's known as bound essences, which allow you to get more loot in sever activities. However, if it's not a red box weapon, it doesn't matter. To cut to the quick, the best way to play Season of the Haunted is basically to play it as little as possible, kind of like a mobile game, because it really does feel like you're rewarded less and less the more you play, and you start to see the tediousness of the task, and you start to burn out. However, if you just wait for reset, play for half an hour, unlock your crown perks, unlock your red box weapons, and then go fuck off and play something else, you get all the loot you want with very little of the work. Simply put, I guarantee you will enjoy this season of Destiny more if you played less. And that's probably not good game design, but I have once again gone on longer on this topic than I intended, so it's time to move on. The story of Season of the Haunted is quite possibly one of the best stories told in Destiny. If you ignore that it really doesn't give our character any motivation.
But Joker, we handled our nightmares in Shadowkeep.
Okay, and? We never dealt with the Death of Cade, there's been 2 expansions since, and a plethora of enemies since Shadowkeep. And you're really going to sit there and tell me they couldn't have gone into the psychology of a Guardian who, for all intents and purposes, at maximum, was resurrected 7 years ago, and has been saving the world every day ever since? Or at least every other weekend. You're really gonna sit there and try to tell me that there's not a better story there? You're really gonna sit there and try to tell me that watching Crow deal with the fact that he's Aldrin for the 5th time, or that a vending machine's family dying that randomly got tangented into existence after 7 years? And no, I have nothing bad to say about the Kaido and Gaul story. That was really well set up. We've known about it since day 1, year 1, and we got to finally see it come to a head. But if we set aside Bungie's unwillingness or inability to tell a story about the Guardian in any meaningful way, the ideas that were explored in Season of the Haunted were explored well. However, by the end of the season, I realized the story wasn't sad or heartbreaking. The conclusion did nothing for me. And that really has nothing to do with the quality of the story being told, but the way that it was delivered. Well, what do I mean? Right now, I'm playing through Final Fantasy XIV's Shadowbringers, and my Warrior of Light was diagnosed with a terminal case of Moe butt cancer. They're going to die. But it's a video game and an MMO, and Endwalker exists. So I don't think it's a spoiler to say we don't actually die. But you know, sometimes it's not the destination, it's the journey. Currently in game, my character has no clue how long they're going to live. But they're going to save the day regardless. After finding this out, the game spends about an hour building up the people of the First, learning that you're the Warrior of Darkness. And you see friends and people who you've only met a couple of times, people whose lives your actions have changed. To your closest of companions, seeing their hurt and their anger be palpable.
I am not about to stand in her way now. Not after failing her in her hour of need.
You're even kinda sort of offered a way out. You of course don't take it because you're the hero and you have a world to save, but it is an interesting moment. And maybe, just maybe, in the saving of that world, we save ourselves. I felt more for the people of the First, the Scions, and my character in this 1 hour than I did for anyone in this season of Destiny. And I've been playing Destiny way longer. So why is Final Fantasy XIV's story of trauma more heartbreaking than Destiny's? Now first, of course, the obvious. Final Fantasy XIV is a longer, story-driven game, but I've also had years with Destiny and all its characters, and it's not like Destiny isn't a story-driven game. It's not like there's not a lot of lore, so what was it? For me personally, it was in the cohesiveness of the story being told. It's a very personal, heartbreaking moment for the player, something Destiny lacks, as the player is often little more than a camera attached to a weapon. But it's not only that. In that hour of content, there's no breaks, and that's really the point I want people to focus on, not the comparison between the two games, because that's divisive and people get upset about that, but hey, details. But the idea that with emotionally heavy, pathos-driven storytelling, when it's spoon-fed out 5 minutes at a time over the course of months, it loses that emotional resonance, that impact. It was the episodic nature of Destiny's storytelling that really undercut the cathartic feeling that comes from heavy emotional storytelling. By the time you get to the end, you've moved past it, digested it. And I think a lot of people can agree. I mean, after all, binging content has become one of, if not the most popular way to consume content. And I think that's why I liked Witch Queen so much. It was one cohesive experience, instead of one broken up and dished out over the course of months. All in all, Season of the Haunted I think represents an interesting time in Destiny. The seasonal model is wearing thinner and thinner with every passing season, as are rewards and incentives. While the story does continue to get better and better and better, even though I have grievances with it, it is still hindered very much by the way it's delivered. And while the seasonal model will undoubtedly continue for the foreseeable future, going into Lightfall, I think Bungie needs to take a long, hard look at how they deliver content. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Remember to like, but only if you did, subscribe for more, feel free to donate to my Patreon if you're feeling particularly generous, and above all else, stay frosty.